think we are recording, Rafe.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right, so welcome everybody. One of my core things that I'm going to dive into and talk about a lot in the following years is how to make our body be more functional and be more ready to face different situations, be more like our grandparents, be more ready to work at something without pulling a hamstring, without getting ourselves into trouble and need of surgery. So having said all that, so you are the perfect guest, my friend, I think, for this. Thank you for coming on. So Rafe, if you please introduce yourself shortly, tell us of your bio, who are you, and then we can dive into a few subjects.
Yeah. So I'm the founder of EvolveMovePlay. EvolveMovePlay is basically the idea that the human body evolved for movement. It didn't evolve for sedentism, and we're suffering a lot of disease because of sedentism, but that actually we evolved to develop movement primarily through play. And this is something that's really misunderstood in our approach to physical culture. And it's one of the reasons why we have so much difficulty getting people to actually engage in physical culture. So that was the inspiration for the idea of Evolve, Move, Play. And it comes from my background as a parkour athlete. I've been doing parkour for 17 years. And I've also been doing martial arts, I guess for 30 some years now, because I started when I was 6, I'm 39 now. I've been in and out of the martial arts. Haven't put quite as much dedication into martial arts as into parkour, but definitely logged a lot of hours on the mats and entangling with people outside as well, which is fun. Worked as a bouncer for several years. I've done strength training stuff since I was 12. I was a gymnastics coach. I started early on with CrossFit. Kind of been involved in a lot of these different movement communities from pretty early on. And my stuff now, I would say what we teach is kind of the focus of it is parkour in nature. That's the most central movement focus, but also what we call rough and tumble play, which is bringing people into these kind of physical game scenarios where they're exploring their ability to strike and grapple and escape and evade each other and work as a team, all the kind of fundamental things that human beings needed from a combative situation, but with a real playful focus. We also teach elements of wilderness awareness and nature skills. This is something that's come into our work through many of our students who've come to us through the Wilderness Awareness School here in Washington, and has really fit well with what we're doing. And I've been really inspired by the work of Jordan Peterson and John Vervaeke on the meaning crisis, and really understanding that what ultimately is most motivating for people is a deep sense of meaning. And so that's kind of what we've evolved towards really being aimed at, is helping people live more meaningful lives and experience life more meaningfully through practice. And so the practices that we've found really help with that are some kind of movement practice, some kind of mindfulness practice, something that takes us into nature, and something that helps us bind together in community. And so we have a variety of practices that help fuel all of those central connections.
All right, so great. That was a great intro. So you have a lot of experience about a few things, central things. You said martial arts, parkour. You were even a bouncer. That's
Yes.
That sounds fun.
It was super fun. Well, the tangling with people part was fun. The hanging out in smoky bars playing house music, I didn't enjoy particularly, but when people got physical, that was always enjoyable for me.
Before we go, I have a few questions about the fourth thing you said about the meaning. Before we go into that, I want to ask you, what exactly was your martial arts training? About what?
Yeah, so there's been quite a few different things over the years. I started in Tang Soo Do, which is Korean karate. Tang Soo Do is literally just a translation of the kanji for karate into Korean from Japanese. So it's not so different from, say, Shotokan or one of the basic styles of karate. And I think I trained there for a year or two when I was quite young. I was 6, 7 years old. And then my school shut down. And then my dad was training Aikido, and he took me to train Aikido. But we were driving an hour and a half to the Aikido school. And I can't remember actually, honestly, how often we did it or what was, like how deep that went. I definitely don't feel like I have as much familiarity with the movements in Aikido as I do. I can still kind of drop into stance and throw the styles of kicks and punches that I learned in Tang Soo Do. And then I started in some kind of Kung Fu. I don't know which specific school. I think it was more of a Northern style of Kung Fu based on the way that we moved. But I did that for 3 years in my early teens. And then I took a year or two off once I realized that I wasn't learning anything that had anything to do with fighting. Lots of forums, lots of use of fans. And then at 15, my older brother found a jiu-jitsu school. We just watched the first UFCs and got into that. So we started training with an Army Ranger in his shed, learning mostly jiu-jitsu, but bits of kickboxing as well. And then when I went to college, I started a boxing club and was training boxing skills. Then I ran into some Russian martial artists from the Scott Sonnen lineage and kind of learned some of that approach. And then got back into Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, spent a few years there. And then did some capoeira, did some more sistema, and then went back to Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've been training just about half the year in either Muay Thai or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu over the last 4 years, and then take the summers off because the parkour stuff becomes too intense and I have to focus on that. So something like that.
That's a long laundry list of martial art experience, man. But okay, so how come and you delved? What are the character traits for a guy to go into different styles of moving yourself in aggressive or defensive motions? Because I think when I see martial artists, and I'm not training in any martial arts yet, but when I see them, I see different styles of movement. So I want to ask you, how come and you didn't, stay in one, and you wandering around all these martial arts over the years?
Yeah. Well, my Tang Soo Do schools just shut down, so I didn't have the opportunity to continue with Tang Soo Do. We lived in a very small town, so that was just off the table. And then I stopped Kung Fu because, well, what happened was literally one of the students got in a fight, and the instructor started teaching that kid a completely different set of curriculum, which was much more actually based on like Wing Chun than the stuff that we were learning. And I was like, oh, well, if what we're learning doesn't have anything to do with being able to fight, then I'm not interested anymore. And then I picked up capoeira, not really as a fighting skill. I picked it up primarily for the acrobatics and the game element of it because it was fascinating to me. And so I just enjoy playing capoeira. I think it's a really amazing general movement practice and kind of culture. And then the Russian martial arts stuff, I just kind of bumped into people who were into it and got the opportunity to train with them. It was never something that I actually personally really sought out. It was just those were the training partners I had available to me who made themselves present in my life. And then ever since I was 15, the arts that I've been devoted to when I have time is Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And that's basically because they're the most widely available, highly effective martial arts, in my opinion. Like you could do combat sambo and you get a lot of that. You could do sanda instead of Muay Thai and you get a lot of the same value, but it's much harder to find sanda schools or combat sambo schools than to find Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So the basic MMA. I mean, I love boxing as well. I've done a little bit of judo training and have a huge love for the throws in judo. And I think all these things are great, but I think the basic kind of foundation arts of MMA are the most important delivery system for combative ability. And then you need to add certain things to really be able to engage in self-defense. But if you don't have that real combat sport delivery system base, it doesn't matter how much you practice eye gouges and throat biting and all this stuff. You're not going to be able to access it in a real street fight if you haven't done all the alive mat work.
So yeah, it's once again, it seems to me that you were trying to find the most practical thing, because you said you dived into the jiu-jitsu and the Muay Thai, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've heard the same from other people that are training that these two and boxing, they say.
And American wrestling. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so great. So let's get to the movement stuff. You said before we go into your story, before going to your childhood, because I think that there's something there that I want to explore. You said four things. You said to find meaning. You said movement. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Nature.
Yeah.
What was that? All right. So movement, nature, social,
Yeah. Community,
and the fourth,
mindfulness. So,
mindfulness. All right. All right. So can you explain shortly why these four?
yeah. So one of my mentors, John Vervaeke, is part of what's called the 4E cognitive science revolution. So a human being, right, is something that is always embodied, right? Cognition can't be separated from the body, but we're also a thinking thing, right? That body is always embedded within an environment, and it's always part of an extended network of other minds, right? And then cognition is always enacted. So if we think about it from that frame, in order to fulfill and to fully experience what it is to live a human life, then you need to actually fully embody yourself, right? You can't just cogitate your way to competence or capability or happiness. Real knowledge, in sense, has to live in the body and has to come up from experience. So I think it's important to study what's happening in the mind, but it's also extremely important you need that balance between the body and the mind and the interaction between them. So that's where the movement practice comes in. The movement practice is where we start to come into relationship with the world around us and develop that capacity and those action capacities that give us a sense of freedom and power and capability. And then that is expressed, of course, in relationship to this external environment, and the environment that we evolve for is the environment of the natural world. And people have this inherent love for and sense of awe and sense of meaning that comes just from interacting with nature. And so I want to embed my practice in that. And I want my practice to not only be me moving in nature, but me more deeply understanding nature and having a better relationship with nature and capacity to work with nature. And then ultimately, a lot of the meaning in our lives and a lot of what gives sustenance to us is embedded in their social and relational world. And so if I have a practice like parkour or martial arts or something else, and it makes me very strong individually, but it doesn't help me negotiate my relationships, it's not that valuable to me. So there has to be a bridge in each of these areas for, in my belief, the kind of development of the fully individuated individual, right? To live the best human life that's available to me.
So you want to, it sounds to me that you integrate things all together. You want to find things that are in fact practical, but not in the dull sense practical, in the meaningful sense, if I can pronounce that correctly. So yeah, I've seen the same with myself lately, that I'm 30. So when I was younger, I was trying to find things regarding movement and regarding social community that were not for my benefit per se, but it was just my persona. So I was feeding my persona. I was going to the gym because there were many girls. And I even got my trapezius pulled because at some point there were three girls coming inside the gym. They were very beautiful, as you can imagine, with their tight leggings. And I wanted to make a show of myself, and I tried to, pull more weight than I could really. And I got my first impression of being a fool. And that was one of my awakenings, honestly, even though I'm joking. Sometimes awakenings come in weird forms. But what I got to myself, and I did other stupid things about community. I was trying to be the man, doing parties for strangers, no value for myself, really, no value for closest friends, for my family. I was putting everybody that really loved me in a precarious situation, if that's correct, in a difficult situation financially and situationally, making their lives hard just for me to be the man for many strangers, which I kind of succeeded. And it was all in vain, as you can imagine. So these formative years of mine teach me a good lesson. The lesson was to find meaning when you do something and be real. Don't be fake. It's really something that I hope many young men can apply it to their lives. And I'm very happy that see you have these four tenets, these four fundamental things.
Mhm.
And I want to now ask you about the nature thing. So let's say that the guy, does correct movement, has a tight community inside his city, and has a mindful practice, maybe meditating, maybe journaling, but he doesn't have the nature in his life, no nature for him other than 2 weeks when he get a leave from his job during the summertime. So why is nature, in your opinion, important for a whole human being?
So I grew up in the natural world. I grew up at the end of a dirt road surrounded by woods. And I moved to the city and I found that there was something really missing for me. And so I was practicing parkour, and parkour was really perceived as an urban sport. So training on walls and rails and urban architecture. And I found these trees, and they were really fantastic for parkour. And they invited something out of me, and fluidity and beauty of movement that I hadn't really found anywhere else. And so I trained there all the time. And I was like, where can I find more of these trees? And so I started researching what type of tree it was. It turned out it was actually the third most common tree in my area, but it only creates shapes like this in really special circumstances. But it ignited this curiosity in me. And then I came to a point where I had overtrained myself and I had stressed myself out through traveling the world and teaching. And I had a little bit of a nervous breakdown, and I couldn't train normally. So I couldn't run and jump and climb to the same degree that I normally would. I would get heart palpitations if I got about 6 feet off the ground. And so I had to take time off. And so I decided to just walk through the woods every day. And as I was walking through the woods, I had this realization that I couldn't name most of the plants around me. I didn't know where the animals were moving in and out. And I felt like that I was blind to all these stories that were being told around me. And so I started to think of awareness of the natural world as a kind of literacy. And I thought about how barren my life would be without literature, without books, right? How much I wouldn't know if I couldn't read, right? And then I thought, well, reading a script, it's sort of like exapted from our ability to read tracks that are moving through the forest, right? These symbols that indicate something. And so I started to think of, like I said, that the ability to read the natural world is literacy. And then I started thinking that the stories in the natural world around us are the stories that we were attuned to through almost our entire evolution. And most of us are blind to them. So I feel like the average human being walking through the forest is like an illiterate person walking through the Library of Alexandria. There's a wealth of richness and meaning that is right there at the tips of our fingers, right there, impressing itself upon our retinas. And it's meaningless to us because we don't have the literacy. Like literally, if you look at a tree, right? Like if you walk past a tree, the average person, it's just a wall of green, right? But I walk past a tree and I see maybe ways that I can jump in that tree, right? But like a forager would walk past that tree and know what the value of that wood was and what kind of animals were associated with it, what kind of fruits could be born from it, right? And is the bark good for fiber, and is the cambium something that you can eat? And all of that's literally meaning, right? The world is more meaningful to you. Jordan Peterson has this analogy of compression. So when you take a picture and you upload it online, right? How much can you compress the image and retain the meaning of it? Right. And the more the smaller and more pixels you have, the more information there is. And the larger the pixels are, the less information is there. Right. Well, you can think about that as how we kind of work with the rest of the world like that. We're looking at something and we sort of just maybe compress it down to just green stuff. Right. That's just a really low resolution version of what nature is. So you look at a tree and you see a green thing. I look at a tree and I see all the ways that I could climb it. Now it's higher resolution, right? And that's literally more meaning, right? So if we're looking for meaning in life, there's no richer source in some sense than the entire living world that is around us. And I think that in many ways, this is where our instinct for spirituality is properly oriented, or at least a major part of it, because yeah, the earth is what gives rise to us, and we are ignorant of it. And that just seems tragic to me. And you can live in a city and still attune to nature. There are trees, there are animals, there are birds, right? If you go outside and you listen to the birds, then they'll start telling you the stories of the city. They'll tell you, which animals live where, and when there's a cat coming by or a fox. They'll tell you, what time of the season it is, and many other things. So just because you're in a city doesn't mean that nature is not there for you. It just takes a little bit more looking.
All right. That was poetic. Yeah, I wasn't expecting such a deep, insightful answer. I was expecting something simpler. But I should probably stop expecting things and just be present. So thanks for the answer. And I'm going to think all over all of these things that you said, because this is the first time I'm thinking of meaning and literacy of nature. But it makes sense. When I was 2 years ago, I had a friend. He's still my friend, but he's now in England, in your genetically homeland. And when we first met, I didn't know who he was and what he knew about nature. I always had an affinity for nature. My grandparents are all farmers and animal farmers, so every time I went to my grandparents, I always saw animals, chickens, goats, whatever, and olive trees. Everything here, making wine, making olive oil, or whatever, everything. All right. But I never got deep into things. I always liked nature. It was in my blood. I always loved to be in nature. I loved to be in nature. But I never really had any, like you said, literacy. So I was like a stupid man wandering around nature, liking it, liking the emotion, the air, the sky, but it was completely ignorant. I could literally die. I couldn't read anything, any sign. And then I met that guy, and Alex. And Alex knew about everything. And he is the same age like me. He's 30. And he literally knows about everything regarding trees, regarding birds, regarding signs, regarding how to find the signs in the sky, the zodiac signs, the North Star, whatever. And I remember the time like yesterday, like it was yesterday. I remember walking out. There's a nearby park here, big one, and we were wandering around, and he was showing me trees and saying what that tree does and how does that tree grow. And I felt so dumb, so idiot, so stupid. And I really felt shame. I don't feel shame, I can go out naked and feel no shame. I literally done something like that in the past. I have really no shame against people, but I have shame when I don't know nature. I feel shameful. What the fuck? How can I be near all these things and I don't know what they are? So stupid. So that's great. Thanks for all that, what you said. I think more people have to, maybe they could give a chance to learn more about nature and, care about nature, because if you don't know somebody or something, how can you care about it, really?
Yeah. Really. That's one of my big things that I think is important about. We have to change the way that we treat our relationship to the natural world, because we're, at least in the, in the Western Europe, there's this huge, in North America and the West, there's this huge thing about, we have to protect nature. And that's important. But if you don't get people in relationship to it, then you're not going to create real stewards, right? It's something that people wave their hand at because it's not actually relevant or important to them. It's not salient in their life. They don't have relationships with the trees or the soil or the land. They don't see what's happening, right? And I just don't think that you can get people to care deeply about the problems of the environment without getting them in relationship to it.
Yeah, I find that ironic too. I'm studying right now about the sun cycles, the zodiac signs, how did all that began back in the day, probably many thousands years ago. Astrology was big, very big. I thought probably many people knew about the stars and how to read, like you said, signs in nature. It was not only surviving, not only something that you should do probably to survive, but also to be connection. And probably I think that probably our ancestors were in much deeper connection with all the animals and the plants around them, in the soil and the sky. That's a thing I want to ask you. So you said about nature, and many people, when, like you said, many people, when you say nature, they think of probably a field of grass, forest, or something. But what I'm wondering is, what is the effect of a clear sky? Waking up or going out for a stroll during the night, seeing all the stars. And I know you said that you grew up in a rural area, so you probably had pretty good sky, if I can guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and I'm from villages, and one of my villages is in Epirus, Greece, which is a very mountainous area. It's called Epirus from the famous king Pyrrhus. I don't know if you know that guy. Do you know?
Yeah, Pyrrhic victory.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yes, you know your things. All right, you know your history. So, and I'm from there. It's a mountain. So every time we go to in the summers, there, it's a little bit chilly, but it's 1,200 meters up. I don't know how many feet that is.
About 3,000. It's over 3,000 feet. About
Yeah, probably.
4,000 feet.
Yeah.
Pretty
And
high.
I mean, I'm living in Athens. I was living in Germany back in the day, but that sky, it's really something else. I mean, I still remember the time going there and looking up and really getting lost, really forgetting about Earth, about gravity or whatever that is. Really getting immersed into something strange and spiritual. I cannot describe it in words. It's like you look up and you are like, fuck, what the fuck is this? And you look at the horizon and the mountain and you listen to the nightly owls and all that stuff. And there's a bear there in the forest, because we have also a deep forest. And you and you listen to probably a couple of wolves, doing their the thing. And you cannot, even if you don't want to be immersed, even if you don't want to be connected to the nature, you have to. You have no choice, it feels like. So what's the effect of great sky, and what do you think about skies in the city? So let us know about your experience, and we'll go from there.
Mean, the sky does seem to invoke awe in human beings and have some sort of spiritual impact on us. Something kind of interesting about a human being. We look up and see something that changes our perception of ourselves, right? And our myopia and narcissism are definitely things that we need to work against. And sometimes just exposure to the sky gives us a sense of how small we are and how great the outside is. I went to Peru for an anthropology field school, and we were 10,000 feet above sea level and zero light pollution, skies that were so clear you just couldn't imagine it. And the Milky Way there is like a river. It's like a white river through the sky. And the natives believe that that when you die, your soul runs down the rivers into the ocean and then comes up out of the ocean as a river through the sky. And I always thought that was amazing. So you can see that it has this impact on people. I mean, on a more scientific level, we know that dark skies are associated with being able to sleep better, and that, all of your circadian rhythms, all your biology is really heavily impacted by the type of light and when you're exposed to it. So if you want better testosterone, better thyroid hormone, better, cortisol regulation, all of these things, being somewhere where it's truly dark when it's dark, and somewhere where you get good light early in the morning and maybe see a sunset. Like all these things actually have really powerful impacts on our biology, and something that's only just sort of being discovered by science right now. And when you say it, I think people still feel like it's a little bit woo, but like the research now is really strong. Like early morning light exposure has massive effects on the sex hormone cycle, thyroid function, all of these things. And then at the same time, if you are exposed to a lot of light in the evening, that also disrupts those cycles. So we know that our biology is deeply tuned to the natural world. It's reliant on these signals from the natural world. So I don't know that we know every impact that the dark, star-strewn night sky has on us, but we can feel it when we're out there. And I moved from a big city, Seattle, to a small town recently, a medium-sized town, and the quality of the skies at night was just so different. And it was like, for months, my wife and I would step outside at night and just be in awe of the sky. And I highly recommend it. If people are busy in their urban lives, just go somewhere where you can see the night sky and recognize what it does to you. That's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, I can attest, by the way, two things. First of all, I'm thinking of going out of Athens, moving out. Yeah. And saying what you said about you moving out, it's also another testament, or probably another testimonial, that I probably have to do that to find a better sky. But also, when I go to my village and stay there for weeks, I have a much better sleep. And I know that probably it's, a lot of factors. Probably the temperature is better, colder. The air is flowing fresh. I mean, the sky is beautiful, no light pollution. I mean, it's a village of 100 people up in the mountains of nowhere. So yeah, I can attest to the morning, waking up fresh and, looking, of course, at the view is, it's immense, looking mountains and valleys. Shit.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, that's being wealthy in my mind. If you can find food security and have that too, combine these two. That's
absolutely.
Yeah. So you are in the western coast of the United States, as I can imagine.
Yeah, I can walk over and see the Puget Sound from the street that I live on. Lummi Island and Vancouver Island are between us and the ocean. So there's two islands in between us and the ocean. I'm about an hour south of the Canadian border. So I'm pretty much as far northwest as you can get in this country of the United States without going to Alaska.
Yeah, really. Having said all that, so let's talk about your trainings. I don't know if you do seminars. Talk about that. So what do you do with the EvolveMovePlay, right?
Yeah. So I co-founded a parkour gym in Seattle in 2008. The teaching program started in 2008. We got the gym in 2009, and I was there until 2013. So spring of 2013, I left and founded this company, and I was told by Ida Portal and Kelly Starrett to go out on the road and start teaching my approach to natural movement. And so I took their advice and started teaching 2-day workshops, and got to travel a lot of the world doing that, which was pretty great. But I had a family, and after my wife had our third child, it became a little too much to ask her to try and do the single mom thing while working full time while I was on the road. So I had to rearrange my business. And so we'd been teaching this 7-day retreat. It started as a 3-day retreat and then kind of evolved up to now 9 days every summer here. And that was what people loved best about what we were doing. So we decided to focus on that and start doing 3 a year of these long retreats. So we do 2 4-day retreats and 1 9-day retreat right now. And then we, took the money that we'd earned and invested in building an online academy so that we could support students, not just when we came to town, but all the time. So we have an online academy. and we teach these retreats, and that's kind of the primary business model right now. And you can find that information on our website.
I want to ask you about the retreat thing. So you said that you started up with the advice of Kelly Starrett and Ido Portal, and they said to go, 2-day things, and then you started because of necessity. You started staying at home or staying around your place and doing retreats, so that you can be at home, but also go for a deeper training. So, why do you think retreats are so effective or efficient?
Yeah. Well, I mean, what we do is there's some magical ingredients that not everyone has access to. So actually, I had been wanting to take my students at the gym out into training nature for a while. And the areas that I'd really developed a lot of my favorite nature training were near my family home. They're about an hour and a half north of Seattle. And so I conceived this retreat, Return to the Source, before I left the gym. And so that was the first, I left in June, I think, and then we had this in July. And so it was already in the works. But as I was in the process of leaving the gym, I decided it was originally just parkour in nature. And I was like, well, I want to offer the rough and tumble and some of the strength training and ideas, the other stuff that I was working on through this retreat. And I approached the students who'd already signed up and said, hey, do you guys want to do this? They said, yeah. So that was the first thing. The first time that the kind of material that became EvolveMovePlay all came together. That was actually before we had announced the name. And so then we just did that annually. So it was 3 days for the first 2 years, I think. And then I went to 5 days, and then 7 days, and then 8, 9 days. And this year was the 10th year that we'd done it. It was the 10th annual event that we'd done. So we did it on my family, on my dad's land. So I have land that's been in my family since 1920. And my dad is a world famous natural builder. And for me, this was like, well, whatever. It's just a place that I can set people up to camp, right? Like I wasn't that excited about my dad's stuff. But when I took people there, people were really excited about the area that we were in, like seeing my dad's architecture and artwork. And we have a wood-fired sauna, and we have cold plunges, that we have a water right to a stream that comes down this mountain, and we channel it down, and it comes out as a fountain and then creates a series of water-fed pools. So we've got that, and we have this beautiful outdoor kitchen, and it's just a really amazing site. And so 2 days it's just not that much time to share such a wide-ranging integrated curriculum. And then when you do the 2-day retreats and I'm traveling, I'm in some other city, then people don't stay together. You might go out to dinner with people after the seminar, but it's not the same as staying overnight with a group of people. But when you do one of these long retreats, you have people together for, the entire day and night cycle. And so they're sharing meals, they're having time around the campfire. So there's a lot more storytelling that happens. And then music started to become a bigger and bigger part of it as well. We had people who came and who brought instruments and played instruments, and we found that was really powerful and bonded people. And then one of our students wrote a song about the experience of being at the event. So now we teach that song to all the students who come. And we had a bunch of students who came. Well, we had a number of students who came through the Wilderness Awareness School. And so then we started weaving in learning to make fire and learning bird languages and sit spotting and, all the nature connection practices. And it's hard to fit all the material into a 2-day thing. And, we kind of, if we do a 2-day thing, we're going to really lean heavily on the movement aspect of the practice, because that's what people are most aware of that we do. But as we have this longer template, we get to weave all these themes together. And it creates I think that I read once that it takes 500 hours to create a real deep friendship. But I think that it's not the quantity of time you spend with somebody, it's the quality of the time. It's an accumulation of meaningful experiences with somebody. And so by taking people through climbing through a waterfall, making fire together, singing in a sauna together, doing a jump they'd never thought they'd do together, playing a bunch of games, being really physical with each other, that creates a sense of deep bond and meaningful relationship really rapidly. So there's something that comes out of these retreats, which is unlike anything else that I've seen really in the movement community, because it's just a unique confluence of a lot of things that I think are are deeply connected to what makes people feel connected and what makes people feel a deep sense of meaning in their life. So that's a little bit about our retreats.
Again, how about starting to be a poet or something? I was really immersed. I could really be hypnotized right now. I was imagining all the things that you're saying. I'm jealous. I'm jealous. I have to come there. Or you can come to Greece with your buddies and let's do here a 10-day retreat. That sounds great. I mean, so before we close, do you want to talk a little bit about what is the movement practice that you are teaching in these retreats? Just a few, no details specifically, but what is going to, if somebody is interested to be more functional with his movement, what can he learn with you?
Yeah. So the fundamentals of our movement practice are you need a practice that helps you keep your body healthy and functional. We call that the body integrity practice. So that's strength training and mobility, and actually also sort of awareness of your body, like mapping your body and having good integration of the mind and body and understanding mind and emotional body connections as well. So all that's kind of what we call the body integrity practice. So each day we'll do some practices that are oriented towards creating a stronger, more resilient body and having better awareness of your body and better self-regulation. Then we have the body to environment practice. Can we master our capacity to move through the environment? And specifically, we're going to be looking at natural environments. So we have a retreat coming up tomorrow. This is the first day of the next retreat. And so this is a 4-day retreat. So I can give you kind of the curriculum that we're doing. So the first day, we're going to be meeting at Volunteer Park, which is the big sprawling Western red cedar trees that I mentioned earlier, where I kind of started my deep journey into natural movement. And those trees are a really rich grounds for teaching the fundamental movements of parkour: vaulting, jumping, swinging, moving under things, climbing. And so we'll start with a series of games to introduce them to moving in those in a very open and organic way. And then we'll start helping them become aware of the principles of movement, principles that allow you to move well through the environment in general. So we talk about your ability to move rhythmically, to sustain a rhythm and not have your rhythm be interrupted. So control of your cadence, how to control your directionality of movement, so you're not falling from one side to another, so you're always moving in the direction that you intend. Your displacement, so you're not moving up and down more than you need to, and how to control that to be energy efficient. How to manage your structure, how to orient yourself through the environment. Those are kind of the principles that we look at, the principles of flow. And then we'll be refining and recognizing individual techniques that help us achieve those goals. So that's kind of the way that we structure that. So that first day, we're going to do a lot of vaulting, a lot of jumping, a lot of swinging. And then the next day, we will go to a beautiful rocky beach and practice running, jumping, and climbing down this beach until we arrive in a beautiful sandy cove where we'll be working on games and interactive movement and rough and tumble play. Right? Then we will do some rock climbing and then go into the woods and do some nature games where we work on awareness and how to move through nature and how to be aware of the natural world and that kind of thing. So then the next morning, we'll be working on sit spotting and being aware of the natural world, meditative practices. And then we'll be working on striking. This particular one, we're going to be working on striking. At other events, we work on grappling, but we're actually going to be teaching fundamentals of striking using foam swords to start with, because it's actually easier to pick up a sense of measure and distance and the dynamics of parrying, blocking, striking with an implement we've found than with your hands. Then we'll be working people from the implement to working with their hands. Then we'll be taking them to a beautiful creek where they'll be climbing through a waterfall, hiking up this creek, and then jumping off a cliff. So that is kind of a description of it. And then in the evenings, we'll be doing storytelling, music, group communication stuff. And then the last day will be a lecture about what we've learned over the course of the events, mindfulness practices, and then a closing ceremony. So that's a description of one of our retreats.
All right. So before we go to the end, one last very small question. What is the competency level of the participants? So I can be ignorant about movement and just come to the seminar?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have students who come from all backgrounds. We've had some of the best parkour athletes in the world. We've had professional MMA fighters, and we've also had, women in their 60s who've never done more than hiking. We have a really strong way of scaling it to match the individual needs of the athletes. We can create really intense challenges for those who need them, and we can also scale those challenges for those who are not ready for them. You need to be able to hike and, cover 4 or 5 miles a day over rough terrain and be fit enough to handle that. And, for this one, the autumn retreat, you need to be able to handle the elements and understand how to keep your body warm. So it's not necessarily that everyone can do it, but it's very scalable.
Okay, that sounds great. All right, so yeah, we reached the end. It was a great chat. You said a lot of great things to ponder. And any last word, I don't know, about for the audience, about your things?
Yeah, I always like to just give people a little bit of advice. It's easy to hear this message and be like, oh, that sounds really great, but I can't fly to Washington right now. And then okay, people just put off action for later. But if someone's listening to this podcast and they're intrigued by what they're doing and they want to know where can they get started, the first thing is to just take a walk in nature. The first practice is to walk. It's the biggest missing movement nutrient that people have. And if you can get that walk to take you into nature, even if you have to walk through a bunch of city streets just to walk into a park, spend some time in nature. If you can find a tree, maybe sit down beneath the tree and breathe for 10 minutes. Just breathe quietly for 10 minutes. And if you feel called to, maybe climb the tree. Try to spend half an hour a day for a while walking in nature. And if you feel like you want to jump, if you feel like you want to climb, don't be afraid to. Let the natural world call you into movement and see how that works for you.
Sounds great. I'll do that. I'm going for a walk after our chat, so probably I'm going to climb a tree too.
Good, do it.
All right, so many thanks for you coming on, man. I really appreciate it. You are one of the masters in this field, and I hope that the functional movement grows more and more every year, because I think it's more aligned with the truth of our nature. So I hope more people, younger people, want not to impress ladies in gym, but impress them outside.
There's some functionality to that too. There's
hey, you can impress ladies outside climbing a tree. I mean, at least
backflips work pretty well.
Yeah. All right, man. So guys, thanks for tuning in, and go down below in the description below and find everything that Rafe said, and Rafe's products and Rafe's services and whatever, and media, and see you soon. So ciao, bye bye.